Frontier City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today.
Called Glenn Allison, who will give us a wonderful presentation, so he tells me, on tribal wild steampunk train. Now, he'll tell you about it sometime during the meeting, so stay awake and you'll find out why he's used that title. It's a global quest of self-awakening and inspiration. Join Glenn, a renowned travel photographer, on a non-stop 9-year marathon, journeying, traversing far reaches of the planet, encompassing more than 100 countries, many depicted in his slideshow. It's a visionary adventure launched from the pit of misfortune and bankruptcy that propelled him along a self-awakened path towards the heights of a career of recognition of one of the 10 most published travel photographers in the world. So please join with me in welcoming Glenn Allison.
Hello everyone. Today we're going to go on this global journey, which actually started for me almost 30 years ago. And my very first trip lasted 9 years without stopping. And I was in a new hotel every few days. I would go back to my previous home in Los Angeles about 1 week a year to do my taxes and to see my family and friends and get my teeth cleaned at the dentist, and then off I would go again. I did this for 9 years. So the recurring theme in my presentation today is one of rebirthing, reinventing yourself, encountering all kinds of obstacles, but somehow not being stopped by all of that. So before we start the journey in 1990, I just want to briefly kind of give you the backstory of the 20 years prior to that led me up to taking this trip. So around 1970, I had graduated from the University of California with a Bachelor of Architecture degree. And I practiced in the field for about a year and realized that I would be much more happy if I reinvented myself. This was the first reinvention as an architectural photographer. Of course, I didn't know anything about photography, and so I had to train myself, I didn't even know the difference between an f-stop and a shutter speed, to give you an idea. So at any rate, it was difficult. The very first year as an architectural photographer, I lived in my van. But over time, I learned how to take pictures of buildings, and I hustled around to get assignments. And it was actually very fast, the development. So in the next 7 or 8 years, I had some international assignments. I had many cover story magazines published. But I also had this newfound quick kind of success, led me to becoming very arrogant. In fact, I was so arrogant that I had an unlisted business telephone number, right? So you can imagine what happened the next year. I had no clients, and I went 6 months without paying my rent. I was almost evicted, and I actually had my car repossessed. And this is in Los Angeles. So I realized, it didn't take a lot of soul searching to realize that this arrogance had shut down my career. So I decided I had to get serious and, really tackle those things. And I also had destroyed a marriage during those several years as a result of all that arrogance. So at any rate, I put it all back together, jumping forward to 1998. By then, I had this marvelous home, hillside home above Los Angeles, filled with furniture from the Modern Museum of Art, and I had 5 full-time employees. And in 1998 and 1999, I made $1 million taking pretty pictures of buildings, right? But I was an artist, not a business person. And so I would treat my staff to lobster and champagne lunches, and I was just burning through this $1 million so fast. At any rate, about that time, there was a major real estate crash in America, and it really affected California. And overnight, my income went to zero. I had enough money to last about a year, but eventually I couldn't make mortgage payments, and I had to file bankruptcy. So I was 45 years old at that point, and had been a photographer for 20 years. And so I decided that it was time for another major reinvention of myself. I'd always wanted to travel, so I decided that I would leave the past behind completely. I gave all of my architectural negatives back to the architects who had assigned me to do them, and I decided I was going to become a travel photographer. But I was bankrupt, and I was living in my van again, and I had to get a pizza delivery job, right? So how can you travel, you know? So I realized that, you know, either I could complain about my lot in life, which I, of course, had created by not investing properly and protecting myself, or I could, you know, have a better attitude about it and be the best pizza delivery boy at age 45 that they ever had, right? So I was so enthusiastic. I'd deliver these pizzas, and man, people couldn't believe the life condition. Of course, I got great tips. So it didn't take long, I think, for the universe to kind of realize that, you know, I had learned the lesson. And almost immediately, I got accepted by Getty Images, which is the world's premier stock photo agency. And the way it works is the photographer pays for generating his imagery. He gives it to Getty. Getty licenses it, and they do all the marketing and selling and policing and building and all that sort of stuff. So for their services, they take 50%, right? So I'm in, and they were at that point only accepting photographers of National Geographic quality, right? So I felt really honored to be accepted, but I had no money to start traveling to pay for all this production, right? So I discovered that bankruptcies in California take 9 months, and during that 9 months you don't have to make mortgage payments, and so I quick rented my house out, and with that income in my van before I lost it, I started traveling around the United States, and my goal was to photograph all the major travel icons like the Statue of Liberty and Mount Rushmore, and we're going to begin this journey. So the title of my presentation today is Tribal Wild Steampunk Train, and you're going to understand where this title comes from as we get into it. So at any rate, I'm taking off. I have 9 months to photograph all the major travel icons in America. And by the way, this image, this is the famous Chimney Rock in Nebraska. And you remember in 1991 when Mount Pinatubo erupted, and the ash cloud went around the globe 3 or 4 or 5 times. But during that period, there were these amazing sunsets. And of course, I juxtaposed the peak with a dead tree to get this surreal look. So the first stop on my quest was New York City. Actually, to get this photograph, I had to shoot it from New Jersey, several miles away, with a huge telephoto lens. The lens was so gigantic that it took 2 tripods, one under the lens and one under the camera, with sandbags to stabilize everything, right? And it had to be a crystal clear night. Now, what I didn't realize is that one day, about 10 years later, the World Trade Center would no longer be there, and that this photograph would become rather historical. And ultimately, I've made tens of thousands of dollars earned from publications on this one image. So, you know, the St. Louis Arch, you know, the idea is to catch magic lighting. So I hung around all day long waiting for something magic to happen, and sure enough, you know, the sun glinted off the arch and reflected in the pond. You see those 2 people standing down by the right? Of course, I asked them to stand there for scale, right? So went up to Toronto, you know, to get us, this is another one of those Mount Pinatubo sunsets. Standing on another freeway overpass, doing a time exposure with the time exposed tail lights going into the city. So eventually, the 9 months had expired, and I lost my house, and I lost the van, but I still had somehow kept all this expensive camera gear out of bankruptcy, right? So now I was really going to be homeless because I lost the van that I was living in, right? And that year I only made $700 from Getty. So clearly I mean, that 9 months. Clearly this wasn't working. You know, that was before the internet, it was before digital cameras. It just took a while for Getty to get all these images distributed around the world. So what am I gonna do? You know, I'm broke, and you know, I only made $700, right? So I sold this huge lens for $5,000, and with that $5,000 I bought a Euro pass that would last me several weeks. I bought $3,000 worth of film, and I had $1,000 in my pocket, and off to Europe I went to photograph all the travel icons of Europe. I could sleep in the train, and I could use my $1,000 sparingly and stay in youth hostels and really do it on a budget. This is the famous Moulin Rouge in Paris, and to get this photograph, it's photographed under an entryway into the Paris subway line, and this Art Nouveau sign. So back then it was before Photoshop, so you had, the way you shot it was the way it looked, right? But the Metropolitan sign had no light on it. So I went out the night before with the flash of the camera, I tested it. Are we losing? Put another nickel in. Put another nickel in. Okay, we're back on. So I determined the exposure to set on my flash to get the perfect exposure for the Metropolitan sign. I did time exposures to see how long the time exposure needed to be to get the windmill of the Moulin Rouge rotating, but not become a full circle. It was a quarter second. I came back the next night, set up all those same settings, waiting for twilight until it balanced with the neon light. Zam, I got my shot. So, you know, I was out of money, right? And I knew that this was going to be an incredible struggle. But when I took this photograph, I knew that I also had another winner. And then ultimately it turned out that I earned tens of thousands of dollars on this photo. And even 5 years later, when I went back to Paris, this image was on every billboard and every kiosk of Paris. And I knew that sort of stuff was going to happen, right? Some entertainment magazine had bought it for their cover story that week. But at any rate, you know, here I was in Europe with no money, but taking these amazing photographs. This is Prague, the city of 1,000 church towers. It took me several days climbing around the hillsides of Prague to find an angle of view with the most church towers. And you notice how I left the sky empty? That's because you can put magazine cover titles there, right? You have to pre-plan all of this. Again, another image that I wound up earning tens of thousands of dollars on. Now, I didn't know that this was ultimately going to unfold. This year in Europe, by then Getty was taking hold, and I made $15,000, which was much better than the 700 years from the year before. But the next year it doubled to 30,000, the next year it doubled to 60,000, the next year it doubled to 120,000, the next year it topped out at $250,000 a year in royalties. And I had no idea this was going to happen. I just knew that somehow I had to persevere, panhandle on the street if I had to, whatever to make this thing happen, right? Ultimately, Getty licensed these photos for to be published more than 100,000 times, and I became one of their 10 most published travel photographers of the world. And in the course of about 15 years, I made $3 million from all of this. So my perseverance really paid off. When I was in Amsterdam, however, to take this photo, that night I ran completely out of money. And I approached a businessman on the street, told him my sad story, and he immediately gave me the equivalent of about $10. So, which would last me a couple of days, right? So I took his business card and I said, one day soon I'm going to send this money back to you. And I'm sure he thought, yeah, sure, you know. But sure enough, a couple more months later, I had the money and I mailed it back to him. He sent me a letter saying that his faith in humanity had been restored, right? So even though I had to do those kinds of things in the beginning to make this happen, I stuck with it. Shooting the tulips outside of Amsterdam, to get this, you got to be standing right in the middle of the the tulip bed, and trying to get the photo very fast before the security guards come run the block or arrest me. The famous cheese market there, I'm in a church tower looking straight down over the scene. So after this 1 year in Europe, I then started having enough money to start tackling the rest of the world. And I took off on a trip virtually circling the globe. I had 100 international flights in 1 year. That's one flight every 3.65 days. My goal was to go into a city like Bangkok, find the one killer shot that would be the icon shot of that city, And my goal was just one great photograph per day. This was my shot from that 3.5 days that I spent in Bangkok. To get this, I had to be standing on the roof of a military building across the street. Believe me, this is not easy to do. I was jumping around all over the world, Sydney Opera House, trying to find these icon shots. The Petronas Towers, to get this, I'm also on a rooftop, and I pre-scouted, I knew exactly where the sun was going to go down, and at twilight, the sky is this deep blue, but you get this golden kind of reflection happening. Same thing in the pyramids. To get this shot, I'm actually in the city of Giza, running from house to house, trying to ask people if I could get on their rooftop, not knowing exactly where the sun was going to go down, right? But they're very friendly, and everybody let me up. Eventually, I found my spot. I got this just in time, and I was blessed with these God rays. Again, an image that wound up earning me many, many thousands of dollars. In Hong Kong, to get this, you have to do, this was before Photoshop, it's a tiny exposure plus a flash exposure. So as the double-decker trolley is going by, the flash from the camera freezes one frame, you pan the camera with it, and you get this blurred motion kind of image. In Japan, these are the red torii arches, and in Kyoto, this particular shrine has miles and miles of these arches running all over the hillsides. And what does it look like when you're inside? You get this. The person there, of course, gives it the human scale. In Morocco, a mud kasbah, a telephoto lens, waiting until sunset till you get the magic light raking across the hillside in the distance. In Mandalay, this is the city palace. Now, bear in mind, when you have a sunset, you don't get city lights. The city lights have not come on yet, right? And again, this was before Photoshop. Now I could just combine all this in the computer, but I had to shoot it this way. So most people don't realize it, but the sunset lingers for like a half an hour, sometimes almost an hour, right? And there's just a hint of the pink and orange in the horizon, right? At that point, when you do a 30-second exposure, the city lights are on, and because of this 30-second exposure, the whole sky looks like it's lit up as sunset. But in reality, it was almost black at that point. Little tricks that I had to learn along the way, right? Blessed by this amazing rainbow in Bagan, in the Golden Rock. See the two guys standing off to the right there? That just kind of gives you some scale. Again, it's sunrise, so you get the good reflection of the deep blue. In Suidan Pagoda, in Rangoon, Yangon, I was there at sunrise waiting for the magic light. I saw this group of novice monks circumambulating around. And I just waited and they walked right into my frame, and I was able to get them juxtaposed to these glittering spires. In Inlay Lake in Burma, to get this, I had to be inside the boat. And what's happening here, if you haven't been to Inlay Lake, the guy stands on one foot, he balances on one foot, the other leg is wrapped around an oar, which he then rows with one foot. Both his hands are free, and now I can work the nets and the fish. So when I motioned for him that I wanted to get on his boat and take a photograph, through the net, I, of course, stepped right on the edge of the boat and almost capsized the thing. But the guy has total balance, and he just counteracted, and I didn't get dumped into the river with all my cameras. When I got to Bali, I fell in love with this place, with the lush rice terraces and the incredible culture that they have there. Look at the lady on the right. She's about 5 feet tall, but her offering is like 6 feet tall, right? So when I went to Bali, I thought, one day I'm going to build a house in Bali. This is like a dream kind of place, one of the most exotic islands in the world. So when I was in Indonesia, I also went to Sulawesi. And this is the island of Bunatan, which is famous for its crystal clear waters and its coral reefs. So I chartered a small boat for the day, and it turned out that I could share this boat with these beautiful 2 young Norwegian girls who volunteered to be my models for the day. So during the course of the day, I took about 500 pictures of these girls, right? And it was just like this incredible event. I mean, I had these beautiful models, and I didn't have to pay for them. It was just really fantastic. And then later in the day, they coaxed me to get in the water and to do some snorkeling, which I did. When I got out of the water, I realized that my memory cards, by then I was shooting digital, my memory cards were in the pocket of my swimming trunks in the salt water. I got out and I thought, oh my God, I've lost the 500 pictures, right? So I quick dried them off, stuck them in the camera, immediately got an error message, card unreadable, right? So I thought, oh, I just lost everything. This unbelievable opportunity is now like completely wasted. So I didn't get that shot, and later in the day, just before sunset, I got another view. And when we got back to the hotel, the girls loaned me their hairdryer, so I was quick trying to dry off the memory cards to see if I could somehow salvage these 500 pictures. And I didn't want to melt the cards, But eventually I was able to stick them in my computer. I got every single one of those 500 images off. And the next morning, I put the cards back in the camera, unreadable. They were never readable again. I just throw them away, but really lucky on that day. The Potala Palace in Lhasa. To get photographs like this at sunrise, you've got to pre-scout this. You've got to go up there at like 3 in the morning to wait on this hillside until this happens, right? So it does take quite a bit of effort to get an image like that. This is in Nepal. Here I've put a fog filter over the lens to get this kind of surreal image of the Buddha's eyes. And speaking of Buddha's eyes, moving in really tight with a telephoto lens so it fills the frame and it becomes very ethereal. And also speaking of eyes, would you let this guy give you a shave? So this is a street barber somewhere in Western China, right? And he's not even paying attention to what he's doing. At least he's holding the guy's nose really tight so he doesn't slice off the guy's nose, right? This is in Mali in Central Africa. This is the famous mud mosque. It's the world's largest mud mosque in Dijin, Mali. And I may have said Ghana, but it's Mali. And but the foreground was just hard-baked dried sand, which would have made for a very boring shot. So I thought, okay, I got to put some African color in here. So I found a local guy and I said, look, I'll give you $100 if you can get me 8 or 10 women out here to do the shot. And I realized that $100 was way too much money to offer, but by the time I'd offered it, it was too late, right? So he got these women out there just in a few minutes. I was making all kinds of funny faces to get them to laugh like that. The problem is that a couple of mischievous boys were riding their bicycles between me and the women, and it was destroying my shot, right? So I turned to my fixer and I said, look, either get rid of these kids or I'm not going to give you the $100. He said, no problem. Pulled out a big club, started chasing the boys. I said, no, don't kill the boys, man. You got to be careful what you ask for. The most amazing painted trucks of the world, even better than the Philippines. This is in Pakistan. The problem is, there's all these incredibly painted, decorated trucks, but they're all muddy, right? And so I couldn't find a clean one. So I had a private car and driver, but we were on the last day. He was taking me to the airport, and I still didn't have my clean truck photograph, right? So I said, look, if we pass a truck that's clean, I'm on the way to the airport, I have to have this shot, right? So we did pass this guy. My driver's honking his horn, and we swerving and everything. Eventually, this driver pulled over. He was ecstatic, by the way, that a professional photographer would be, love his truck so much that he wanted to take a photograph of it. If you think it's decorated inch by inch, covered completely on the outside, look at the inside. It's unbelievable, right? In India, this is in Cochin, they have these Chinese fishing nets. The way they work is the net is pivoted at the bottom and the center. The guy runs out, his weight counterbalances it, drops the net down into the water. He stays out there like a half an hour, the net fills up with fish, and then when he thinks he's got his catch, he then comes back, the net lifts out of the water, and he can collect his fish. So I wanted to do this at sunset, right? And the sun at that position lasts about 5 seconds and it's gone, right? So it really is moving fast. So I had prearranged for this guy. When the sun got in position, I gave him the signal, now he ran. Without the guy there, you have no scale, of course. So the point is, you have to set this stuff up. You see all these amazing photographs in National Geographic? Well, this is how you do it. You set it up. Pushkar Camel Festival during the full moon of November, they have 20,000 camels. So normally, of course, when you take a sunset photo, you expect to see a golden sunset sky, right? Well, now with Photoshop, we can do all kinds of magic. That's also at sunset, but now I flip the sky around to blue. Poetic license. This is in Jaipur, India. This is the famous Palace of the Winds. It's actually not a real building, it's a facade. It was built several hundred years ago by one of the Maharajas, and he built this. The building is only about 15 feet thick, and he built it so that his harem ladies could sit behind the lattice-covered windows. They could watch the world go by, but nobody could see them. So this is the most photographed building outside the Taj Mahal in India. And of course, every travel photographer in the world has photographed this. So I'm thinking, like, I've got to do something different, right? So I pre-scouted. I found out that the magic light would be at 11 a.m. and I wandered around the nearby streets until I found this sadhu with his holy cow, waved a few rupees in front of him and said, "Follow me." I laid down on the street and got this photograph. So the next year when I went back, I thought, okay, I've done my sadhu and the holy cow. What can I do next? Well, you see these fence posts, the metal fence posts behind the sadhu? Down the street, I had seen a guy selling Rajasthani puppets. And so I had this idea to borrow a couple of dozen or rent them from him and tie them onto these fence posts. So that's exactly what I did the next year, and I got this back, right? So then I thought, okay, the next year, let's put some real ladies there. I did this in Africa, I can do it in India, right? So I went across the street, I found a jewelry shop, I said, look, I'll give you $100. There I go, I get another $100, right? Give me $100 if you can get me these Rajasthani ladies out there. And sure enough, I got this shot, right? So the next year I'm here and I'm going, well, what am I going to do now, you know? So I went to rent a camel. And I thought, oh man, you know, what am I going to do the next year, right? I couldn't find rent an elephant, right? But I knew I wanted a painted elephant. The problem was, when I got there the next year, the city government had barricaded this whole area. There was no way you could get a big painted elephant in there. So I did choose some elephants, but not here. I call this elephantasy. Now, they don't just paint the front side, they also paint the back side. This one I call Booty Beauty, right? In Jaipur, India, I love Rajasthan because it's so colorful. This is shooting from the fort down into the old town. The buildings are all blue. Can you imagine me trying to deliver a pizza somewhere down in there? You know? Also at that fort, I saw these hands, the bas-relief of these hands on the wall. Apparently, a few centuries ago, when there was a war and the Maharaja lost, all the harem ladies committed suicide by jumping over the wall, and they first put their handprints on the wall. So I thought, okay, how can I, everybody shoots the shot, right? So how can I do it a little bit differently? I saw these group of Indian teenagers walking down the road, and I said, lend me a hand, and they were more than happy to. So to get shots like this, the picture of the subject is as important as the background, right? So I found this sadhu, but he was standing in a cluttered area. So again, I waved some rupees and I said, follow me until we passed this soda pop stand. And I, paid him a few rupees to use it as a backdrop and pose the sadhu in front of it. So I did my Hindi writing. The background is actually just as important as the subject. Again, standing in a lot of clutter, using a telephoto lens, I could throw all the background out of focus. I just asked her to lift her scarf over her face. Gypsy girl in Rajasthan. These ladies are out shopping. I call this shopping spree. They're at an outside vendor selling jewelry, but the color in Rajasthan is so amazing. And the key is to find and shot that the colors work together and you eliminate all the clutter, because there's a lot of clutter and chaos in it as well. This little guy is dressed like Lord Shiva, who's always rendered blue. Of course, he's out there with his little brass bucket to collect tips from the tourists who want to take his photos, right? So I again waved some rupees and said, follow me. Why? Because I needed to find a good background. Because he was painted blue, we walked past the blue wall, I posed him right there, and I call this one, of course, Blue Boy. You see these romantic shots of the Taj Mahal. By the way, most of the shots are out on the river so that you can see the entire spires and get some reflection happening. But to get an image like this at sunrise, you actually have to go out there about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And this is I mean, there's sewage all over the place, there's dead cows floating down the river, there's a crematorium just upriver, there's sometimes a dead body there, you know. It's scary at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when you're out there. You don't know what you're going to step in, right? So when I finally found this shot, the sun was starting to rise, and by the way, at that height, in 5 seconds, it's gone. It's lifted up too high, right? So I'm inching further and further down this little concrete embankment. Right behind me is a maggot-infested dead dog, right? And I couldn't get the sun centered between the minarets without standing directly over this dead dog. So when you see an amazing shot like this, you don't, it's really important to kind of know the background behind it all. It's not always easy to capture something like that. And of course, I went back to rent a camel, right, to get this shot. Around the Taj, there aren't very many camels, right? But I knew the shot, I knew the angle, I knew the sunset. I found a camel walking down the street, and we just rented him for an hour and brought him over. Again, this could happen in reality, but you might have to stand there for 20 or 30 years, right, to get something like that. But this one was the most magic shot I've ever taken of the Taj Mahal. I've been shooting the Taj, maybe I've been there 25 or 35 times, I can't remember, but I always go there because it's the icon shot, and that's the one you make the most money out of. And when this started happening, this is not Photoshop, this actually happened the moment I was standing there. And one day, a year or so later, I was on a flight somewhere, I pulled open the in-flight magazine and flipped it open, and there was a double-page spread of this image. Bought by the Incredible India campaign. So of course I showed it to the guy sitting next to me, and he got all excited. He pulled over the first flight attendant and said, "This guy took this photo, And she got so excited, she brought me a full bottle of complimentary wine, So I thought, gee, I should save this magazine issue and try this trick on the next flight, right? This is also in India. This is in the north in Nagaland. It's just below Bhutan, and next to Burma. So you see that the guy has the India coloration, the dark skin, but he's also got the Oriental facial features. These guys were headhunters, and in this guy's lifetime, he actually collected heads. So I've got to be very careful when I'm photographing him because he's really eyeing my head really closely. So you might wonder, how do you get this magic lighting like this, right? Well, I take my lights with me. This is how you do it, right? So I have an Indian assistant with a boom pole, and have a translucent umbrella, a couple of flash units mounted into them. They're radio controlled off the camera, and I get this magic light. Now you notice how the spear is not glinting very much, but when I took the final photo, I had to rotate the spear just enough to catch the reflection of the light to give this magic quality to it. And of course, I like to get in the photo myself, right? All in the celebration of cultures, right? So this is in Papua, which is part of Indonesia, but right next to Papua New Guinea, above Australia. It used to be called Irian Jaya, but it's called Papua now. So again, you can see I lit this. You can see the light coming from the right, the light coming from the left. I even put a light behind her to backlight her feathers, right? And she didn't have any body paint. So I asked through the translator if they could maybe paint her. Well, they didn't have any body paint, but they pulled out a tube of toothpaste, and with that toothpaste, they put these spots on her. Now, her husband was standing off to one side, and he was not very happy with me. But look at that face, man. What an incredible face, right? This is the village leader, and you might wonder if these guys have discovered some version of natural Viagra, right? Because how do they keep their gourds erect all day long, right? Well, it's simple. You see the little string tied from the tip of the gourd, goes around his upper abdomen, and when they're in battle and running through the jungle, this gourd could flip off. These guys are very modest. They're not going out without their gourd, right? So to keep the gourd in place and erect all day, there's another little hole drilled at the bottom of the gourd, which is wrapped very tightly around his exposed testicles. And by the way, these guys all speak in very high-pitched voices, right? So if you're like me, you go there, I gotta bring a couple of gourds home, right? I mean, for Halloween parties and stuff like that. So a little tip for you guys, never buy a gourd that has a burned tip on it, right? The reason is it gets chilly at night. These guys don't have any clothes. They sit around the bonfire, the gourd's projecting out into the flames, and the tip gets burned. So if they're trying to sell you a gourd with a burned tip, you know this is a second-hand version. Don't buy that one, right? So these guys were only discovered 70 or 80 years ago by the white man and the Indonesian government. And of course, the Indonesian government, being a Muslim government, they wanted these guys to put some clothes on. Of course, these guys were not going to put clothes on because this is their way they live, And but back then, their unit of monetary currency was the pig. And with the pig, they could, go shopping. They could use it as dowry for wives or whatever, right? Well, when the Indonesian government arrived, they brought coins and bills. So these tribal people, they loved the coins and bills. This was a lot easier to go shopping without a bunch of pigs following you around all day, right? But notice, these guys don't have any pockets, right? So where do they keep their coins and bills, right? You guessed it, stuffed inside their gourd. So this is not a culture you want to ask for small change, right? So, when I finally was ready to leave Papua, I went into a souvenir shop, and lo and behold, there were like dozens of gourds to pick from, right? And then none of them had burned tips. So I said, great, I'll buy a bunch of these. So I grabbed half a dozen, some were long and thick and thin and curly, and I went up to the clerk and asked if she had a fitting room, right? So, by the way, I'm not laughing at the people. You guys are chuckling, right? Because it's kind of humorous. We're laughing at us, right? We're celebrating the people. So as I would go back to my friends and tell them these humorous stories, and by the way, a lot of stuff happened to me along this 9 years. I got mugged in Moscow. I had all my cameras stolen in Sumatra. I almost got buried in an avalanche in Tibet, and I almost drowned in riptides off at Puerto Vallarta. So my friends said, gee, Glenn, you ought to write a book about it. So I did, right? And, but I also had a more serious, this is a humorous travel narrative. Not again laughing at the people, laughing at my narrow-minded kind of view of all of this, right? So I want to celebrate these incredible cultures. But anyway, I had a love story idea in mind. I was going to write a book about a travel photographer who roamed the world seeking fame and fortune. He makes his $1 million, he blows through his $1 million, he winds up strung out on drugs and alcohol in Bangkok, and encounters this mysterious Oriental woman who then leads him around the world on a path of self-awakening and realizations that no photograph could ever portray. So I wrote this novel. It was published in 2003. I named it The Journey from Kamakura. This is a famous quote from a 13th century Buddhist monk named Nichiren. He lived in Kamakura, and back then Kyoto was the capital. So his famous poetic line is that the journey from Kamakura to Kyoto takes 12 days. And if you travel for 11 and stop, then how can you admire the moon over the capital? So the idea here is that when you're going for your dream, you can't give up at the very last minute. You got to keep fighting. So that's the theme of the book. That year, by the way, I had to reinvent myself as a novelist. I had no idea how to write, so what I did is I read 200 novels in a couple of years while I was traveling, and paperbacks, I used them like textbooks, and I would mark up all the paragraphs and the descriptions and all the words that I really loved and everything, and then I'd write a few more pages of my novel. The problem is, after 2 years, I had a novel that had 200 styles, and it just was totally unpublishable. So by then, I had made this $3 million from Getty, and I had a lot of money to spend on these kinds of projects. So I hired an editor for 6 months, paid her about $25,000. She worked with me for 4 hours every morning and gave me 8 hours of homework every day. And in 6 months, I completely rewrote this book. But I was doing it like with a mentor. And it was getting the equivalent of a master's degree in creative writing, right? So it got published, and that year in one of the literary awards programs in the States called the Benjamin Franklin Awards, I won Silver Award for Best First Book Fiction. Now, realize I had reinvented myself yet again to be a novelist, right? I also went on a 50-city book tour across the States, had 100 bookstore events in 120 days, about 36 radio and talk show interviews. At any rate, the book was quite successful. And while I had invested most of my Getty money back into traveling so that I wouldn't have to pay Uncle Sam taxes on it, I still had about $1 million left. And the book had been relatively successful, but now I was finished with being a novelist, and I had the money to finally build my incredible house in Bali, right? And remember, I have a degree in architecture, but that was 40 years before, when they were using T-squares, you know, to draw pictures of, working drawings. Now it's all done in the computer. I had no idea how to do this. I had no idea, the technology on everything in construction had completely changed in 40 years. So I decided to reinvent myself as a full-fledged architect, right? So yeah, this is about reinventing yourself and rebirthing, right? So at any rate, I had to learn everything from scratch, but I just let my mind run totally wild. I finally came up with a design that would be inverted steel frame pyramids rising from 21 levels of water covered by thatched roofs and totally glass walls. This is what I designed. My first commission for myself as an architect. So this was the first structure I built. It's a pavilion. The project is composed of 6 of these pavilions. This one is my Buddhist meditation chanting room. You can see it's floating in an infinity-edged pool. The walls are all glass. You got an inverted steel pyramid structure covered by Balinese thatched roof. So, but I had an ulterior motive here, because I knew that if I designed a place like this, I could rent it out as a holiday villa. It was a 2-acre estate, this amazing design. So I could get like $5,000 a night rental on this, to the likes of Madonna or Mick Jagger, And in fact, one of my best friends in Bali runs the biggest wedding outfit there. He frequently rents villas to be a wedding venue. He told me after he saw this space that he could get me a 5-day wedding package for $25,000 and give me 4 of them a month for the entire year. So I was looking at making $100,000 a month just by using this place as a wedding venue. So I had that in mind when I designed this Buddhist chanting pavilion, because it would also be the perfect wedding chapel. Right? So at any rate, the place was amazing. I had this 200-meter boardwalk through the jungle, very romantic kind of place. This is the cross-section through it. That chanting room is on the bottom left, the 3 staggered tiers up above, the upper one's the living room, the dining room in the middle, and the kitchen on the bottom. And underneath that was an underground river, which was going to serve as my art gallery, because I had no place to hang photos and art, because all the walls were glass. So I was going to have stepping stones through my underground river, and that was going to be my art gallery. Bottom line is, this thing got out of hand. The $500,000 I was going to spend on it, well, it became the whole million, all the money that they had in the world, right? And then, guess what happened? This is what it looked like, half completed. The global economic recession of 2008. And the stock photo industry completely died. The $25,000 a month royalties I was making dropped to $1,000. I couldn't finish this place. No investor had any money. The whole world shut down. Nobody's going to go to Bali and buy this project that's half done in a third world country, right? So I couldn't sell it. So I sat there a couple of years trying to find buyers. I couldn't find one. And I thought, okay, I can't travel. I can't finish the project because I need another $500,000. So I thought, okay, I'll reinvent myself. I'll do something that won't cost me any money. So I reinvented myself as a fashion designer. And I could create all of these in Photoshop, right? And another set. So now I okay, I gotta market this, I gotta develop a marketing campaign. But about that time, a buyer came along, gave me a $50,000 non-refundable deposit. Unfortunately, he was never able to raise the rest of his money, and he bowed out. So I was still sitting there with an unsold project, but I had a fresh $50,000 in my pocket. And I was drawing Social Security, so I wasn't destitute. And there was no bank loan on this. I'd spent $1 million cash, so I still owned it. I could still sell it hopefully one day. So I decided that this fashion design was so great, but how about reinventing myself yet again as a fashion photographer, right? So I always wanted to go back to Africa and shoot all the tribal people with all their body painting. Of course, now I had no money to finance these really expensive expeditions. So I thought, okay, there's no models in Bali, but there's a lot of models in Bangkok. So with my 50 grand, I left Bali, I left the project in the hands of a real estate agent. I came to Bangkok, I rented a little shop front, converted it into a studio. I had a friend in Bangkok who was a Swedish girl, a Norwegian girl, who was an amazing makeup artist, and stylist, and body painter. So I decided to jump into the world of fashion photography, knowing nothing about it. How to get models to pose, how to work with professional models, nothing, right? But I would just reinvent myself overnight as a fashion photographer. And once I did this body of work, which I themed Tribal Wild, that's part of my title of my presentation today, then I would, successfully do that, and I would go off to New York and Rome, and Milan and Paris, and I would be, like this fashion photographer. So this is my very first fashion tribal themed image. Again, the side lighting. I'm doing this in my studio against a gray backdrop, so the backdrop that you see there is all put in Photoshop later. I found this model, a professional model in Bangkok from Kenya. She had no hair, which was great because my body painter could paint her head with all these great tribal designs. These artifacts I had bought in Papua, so we were just rolling, The next day we did a fashion shoot. I went to Chatuchak Market and bought an alligator skin, and this model just, she knew how to pose for fashion, which made my life a little bit easier. And the next day we dressed her as a princess. By the way, it takes a couple hours to paint her and style her, and then I photograph for about an hour, so you can only do one session a day. So I had the models coming back day after day, and I got to speed this up a little bit because I'm running out of time. We glued shells on their head, cowrie shells. And again, that alligator skin from Chatuchak Market. And I went out to Kong Toy Market one morning and bought a dead chicken because we wanted to style her as a voodoo witch, an African voodoo witch. By the way, that beard is a grass skirt, so the stylist was getting really creative with this. Here she drips paint down the model, and so I picked a background of paint drips and juxtapose the two together. By the way, her hair is cinnamon sticks on a rope, which I bought at Chatuchak Market. Her breast piece is gourds, also bought from Chatuchak Market. The burlap was bought at Chatuchak Market, and I just threw some coffee on it to get it a nice brown stain and toward the edges like that. I tried to get the model to let me do the body painting. No way. And the next day I went out to the market and I bought fresh fish. Now, she wasn't too happy to be wearing smelling fish for a couple of hours, right? But it's an amazing shot. By the way, here's the gourd guy, right? I was going to say that I entered all these photos in several major photo awards after I did this series. And I won several silver and gold medals with this. So I knew I was on the right track. I knew if I showed up in New York City, I could get fashion assignments now with this body of work. It looks like he's wearing a latex bodysuit. No way. This is all body paint. And by the way, I had a male body painter when we did this one, a female body painter for the other one. So he's wearing one of the gourds I brought from Papua. He's totally nude except for his feathers in his hair and the tooth necklace around his neck, and of course the gourd. And you see the gray background that I used? Well, in Photoshop, I can transform it to this, right? So this is coffee stained paper that I photographed, and then I rotated the coffee stains to be concentric with this gourd. And after the shoot, I gave him this gourd because I wasn't about to wear it again myself. Another model, this one from Budapest, also in Bangkok for about a month. She's wearing one of the big oversized metal Mung Hill tribe necklaces. I'll go through this kind of fast here. She's painted black. That's not toothpaste, that's real paint. So you can see my posing techniques were developing. This all happened just in a matter of a few months, right? This I call avatar. The stylist was unbelievable putting all this. So here I said, be a sexy siren. So of course she obliged. The next day, I asked for the shy teenager, and she did. And then I thought, let's go back to the sexy siren. I like that a lot better. And so then she gave me this. And so to get this kind of pose, I said, pretend you're a black little spider, and you're going to seduce your prey, and then you're going to kill him, right? And she just went into her acting mode, Painted as wood grain, so I chose a wood grain background to juxtapose in Photoshop. Call this one, Don't Give Me Any Lip. And by the way, that's another grass skirt wrapped around her head. Right? So as I developed this, it started kind of coming away from fashion and more into fine art. And I thought, gee, maybe I should reinvent myself as a fine art photographer now, right? And by the way, my $50,000 was just about gone. I could no longer afford to hire these models and pay for the stylist. So I had to end this series, but I did transform them into artworks. By the way, there's about 15 of these artworks hanging in a condo about a couple blocks from here. So if anybody wants to go visit it, just let me know and I'll set it all up for you. But at any rate, you know, I thought, what am I going to do next? I want to be a fine art photographer now. I still don't have enough money to travel. I haven't sold Bali yet. So I started digging through my files to see what kind of images that I had that could be transformed into fine art. And I found this steam train that I had shot in India, which is very graphic. I zoomed in tight to get a nice, tighter, more graphic kind of detail. I punched up the colors in Photoshop and transformed it into wall art. And then in Photoshop, I took this other steam train, and by the way, since I'm a fashion designer, I just transformed this into a fashion statement. But what I really wanted to do was to do this fine art steam train series. This is where the steampunk train part of my title comes in. So I took a couple of these steam train details, merged them together, blended in some textures, added in some blue circles and stuff like that. These are the two images, top and bottom on the right, were the two that I composited to make this image. There's a grungy, wrinkled tarpaulin, which gives me the texture. And in Photoshop, you can do amazing things, flipping the colors around. Another two different, I mean the same one at the top, but a different steam train at the bottom. You can see now when you juxtapose them together, you get, and you know, now I'm developing the techniques of, you know, 3D and sculpture and shadow and texture, you know. So this is now defining the new art series that I want to move into, called Steampunk Train. Nice triptych with using those images. You can just see it, just it's really unbelievable what you can do. Those are the three images on the right, but created the one on the left. This is, by the way, hanging in the condo near here. So this is my latest piece. It's about 1.5 meters long, and I brought a small sample. You can look at it later, you know, and also a small one of the tribal lady, you know. You can look at the detail on those a little closer later. So at any rate, I created this piece, and I really, when I created this one recently, I knew I was onto something, that I could really develop this into a steam train series. The problem is I'm out of steam trains, and so, you know, I need to go shoot some more. Well, I just closed a deal on my Bali project this last week, right? And I'm going to head to Bali soon to close out the whole deal and to recoup a big part of my investment. Of course, I'm going to invest it wisely in passive income streams, but I'm going to have enough money to start traveling again. So at age 73, I am now going to start another, you know, vagabond marathon to shoot steam trains. And I dreamed up this campaign where I'm going to shoot 100 of the world's best steam train museums in 100 cities across the globe in 100 non-stop consecutive weeks. I'm going to create 100 blog posts, which I can then promote on social media. I'm going to create one artwork like this from each week from each museum. And more importantly, or just as importantly, I'm going to make 100 brand new friends, because this is all about, you know, trying to spread hope and inspiration as you move around. And I'm going to finish at age 75, just in time to attend my mother's 100th birthday party in Los Angeles, right? So the point of my presentation today is that no matter how, you know, difficult we might, you know, difficult situations we might find ourselves in, you know, sometimes the world throws us curveballs, right? Like my bankruptcy and rebirthing myself, you know. And so now I have transformed all of that with an enthusiastic kind of approach to no matter what I encounter, I'm going to transform it into the next, reincarnation of myself as a creative artist, right? So if the universe throws us lemons, well, let's just build a lemonade stand and start from right there and be the best pizza delivery boy and the best lemonade seller that ever existed, right? And just build it from right there. So the main point of my presentation today is that no matter what, never ever give up your dreams. And I really want to thank you for sitting through this whirlwind tour. And please grab a business card in the back if you want to kind of follow this escapade over the next couple of years. You can follow me on Facebook. So thank you very much. Very good. Maybe there's some questions. Do we have time for? Do we have some things in here?
Questions for Glenn?
Yes.
Hang on, wait for the microphone.
Can you just, wonderful work, by the way.
Thank you.
Can you just quickly go through your favorite equipment, maybe your favorite camera, favorite film type, favorite lens?
Yeah, well, right. Now I'm shooting digital. I'm using the latest Sony A7R III. The thing is, I need huge files that I can blow up across the wall. Film just won't cut it because you see all this grainy texture, and so I've got to shoot digitally. And it also makes it much easier to go into Photoshop because my fine art pieces now are going to be composites, so I need to do all this in Photoshop. But they need to be very, high resolution to be able to blow them up, 1.5, 2 meters wide. In terms of lenses, I'm using a series of Sony lenses, but I also have some Canon tilt-shift lenses. And a tilt-shift lens is what an architectural photographer uses to correct perspective. But the way I use an adapter so I can use them on the Sony body because the Sony body has a better sensor than the Canon body so far. And so I use this tilt-shift lens, and I shift the image to the left and I take one frame. I shift the image to the right and take one frame. Join them together in Photoshop. Now I have a file twice the size, and I can go 4 meters wide. Right. So that's the kind of stuff I'm using. Anybody else? Yes, over here in the corner. Oh, I had to get your exercise. Oh, okay.
I wonder what you think about the future of photography. You talk about where you started and then Photoshop. So in 20 years, are there people like you still shooting these images, or has technology kind of taken that over?
Well, it's all going to be AI generated, most likely. But that's going to make people like me who create unique, one-off kinds of creations. Even if I'm doing it in Photoshop, this is my artwork. This is my signature. Nobody else is putting the images together the way I'm doing it. So there's still going to be a market for those individualists who want to somehow carve their own path, even amidst all the new technology that's going to come along. Yes?
I have to say I'm really touched and impressed, not only by all of your work, but I'm speaking now as a psychologist, and I've worked with many people, young and older people, but here I see many of you who are probably a little younger than me. I'm 85, and I'm still traveling, but I meet many older people who really just give up, sit and watch TV or get depressed. And I'm so impressed that, as you say, don't give up, keep trying. And that's, so what I find that's really impressive with not only your creative energy, is that you never gave up even at the most lowest times in your life. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to share something with you. After I bankrupted in 1990, I realized that chasing the fame and fortune didn't really bring me a solid happiness. I had relative happiness when I had the money, and I had relative misery when I was living in my van, and I had a good spirit with delivering those pizzas, but basically I could have been really miserable, in the pit of suffering, right? So I did a major midlife crisis. As long as I was going to change my career and go travel the world, I decided that I wasn't going to chase fame and fortune anymore. I was going to go out and celebrate humanity, and I was going to meet people, and I was going to somehow lift them up and somehow give them hope and inspiration. And of course, I had to be an example of how to do that. So I could use all of this defeat, these bottoming outs, as an example to show people that you can rise from that if your attitude is like, if you just shifted a little bit towards not just doing it for yourself, but trying to inspire others, right? So the minute I shifted that gear, then Getty came. The 100,000 publications came. The $3 million came. The ability to reinvent myself as a novelist and an architect and a fashion photographer and a fashion designer, now a fine artist. This all was fueled just primarily because I just decided that I'm going to use my life as an example to somehow inspire people to just keep fighting no matter what.
I just really want to thank you for making me look good. So I just met him at a party where those artworks were hanging, right? And I was really impressed by what you did art with. And I talked to him, thought, wow, this guy can talk. And sometimes I'm listening to talks and I actually feel sorry for the members who didn't turn up to hear this talk, like David Lee the other week. That was just a wonderful and amazing talk, and I look forward to following you on Facebook. When are you actually heading off?
Well, I've got to close out the Bali deal, which is going to take about a month, to do all the paperwork and everything, and I've got to hand over the drawings to the buyer's architect and stuff. So at least a month, maybe 6 weeks or so before I can leave.
I'm just wondering if we could. Do you have an actual art gallery in Bangkok or anything that people can visit?
No, I haven't decided to approach art galleries yet, because until I came upon the steam train idea, I hadn't developed a body of work. And this is just the beginning of it, right? So I know I'm onto something, but I need more steam trains.
See, I can't talk for all the guys there, but I'd be happy to bring on some of those women for my bedroom.
They're for sale, Red.
Obviously, I hope that after you do your Steampunk World Adventure, you'll come back and share that next stage of your journey with us.
Absolutely.
Ran, back over, microphone. Now the microphone guys.
I'd just like to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I worked in the mining industry and was a keen photographer. I've got some good shots of night time, heavy machinery working and so forth. Wow, your photography blew me away. But also your attitude to life and the inspiration and hope that you give to us. And when you mentioned the age, it's really incredible actually. The hairs stand up my own, because I'm just in the process of reading an interview by the Dalai Lama called The Art of Happiness. And it's virtually word for word what you said. Forget about chasing the material things. We've had those, we've lost them. I've been up the same way. But once you start looking at humanity and compassion and living your life and let the energy flow. And I've come today thinking, I'm not sure whether I want to listen to a speech about someone talking how good their photography was. Totally irrelevant, the photos, the message and the inspiration you've given me and the hope. And I'm 68 and my health is 100 times better than when I was 48, so never give up. Thank you.
Absolutely. And by the way, I'm an admirer of the Dalai Lama. I don't practice his kind of Buddhism, but I have been a Buddhist for 45 years, and so this hope and regeneration and everything is part of changing the karma, right?
I don't have 25,000 a night, but I'd like to rent your phone.
So I just wanted to, unless there's more questions, I just want to leave you with my next trip. There's another question, then I'll tell you about my next trip briefly. Yes?
So you're a very talented person. In your next venture, in 2 years' time, have you ever thought about taking up a paintbrush? And I'm not talking about painting houses.
Yeah, what I mean, I've already started playing with this. I'm gonna, I need to somehow combine all of my past experience to generate a new kind of art. So what I'm gonna do is the Steam Train series will be generated by all the digital creations I'll do in Photoshop. And then I'll create a one-off piece, get out the paintbrush and paint on all my stripes and stuff. So it'll be a one-off piece. So definitely I'm going to do that. Yes, another question.
Thanks very much for your talk. When I was looking at photos of your residence in Bali, the residence to be, the thing that immediately popped into my mind was, how are you going to keep that place clean all the time?
Well, by the way, I sold the project, and there was only one pavilion built with glass. The others are not glassed yet. So yeah, it's going to take a big crew. It's going to be a 24-hour job. I finished cleaning glass on one pavilion, I got to move to the next one. A lot of work, yeah.
Yeah, especially with all the water.
Yeah, for sure.
Over to your left.
Any other questions?
Yes, one more. Over to your left.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most stimulating and exhilarating, really, for me, presentations we've had at the Patio City Expats Club. But I'm a kind of happily married man, and I just wondered what your life has been as far as connubial relationships.
Well, I went through 2 marriages, and I found out that I wasn't really good at that. And when I became a vagabond photographer, I just decided that I was going to have a girlfriend in every port, It's called Rent-A-Camel. So to close, I think we're kind of running out of time. So at age 75, when I finish the steam train venture, and of course I'm going to do a steam train coffee table book and so on and so forth, I'm going to start a really grand vagabond. By the way, I've been relatively homeless by choice for the last 30 years, just traveling. In Bali, I slowed down to build this, right? But then I realized I didn't really want to be locked in one place. So at age 75, when I finish the steam train gig, and I'm having art exhibitions all over the world, I'm going to start my next trip. It's going to last 25 years, from age 75 to 100, and I'm going back on the road again. On the road again.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn. Will you still be around after the meeting for a short time? So anybody can ask Glenn a question. Before you go, Glenn, we have not a photograph, but a certificate of appreciation. If you'd just like to come here.
Yes.
Because they're going to take a photograph. Not as good as yours, but nearly as good.
Let me get the lights out.
What's a very good photographer? Thank you. I'm sure Waters